This episode goes out to iTunes reviewer Amber Morant. We hope you're still loving the show. Hi there, Garrett Robinson here. Welcome to the 8th episode of the Nightblade Epic Podcast Season 3. One quick announcement for you today, listener. It's the beginning of October, and so, of course, it's time to talk about the holidays. Now, you might be thinking it's way too early to worry about holiday gifts, but unfortunately, this is 2020. This year has been really hard on shipping and supply lines, and it's hit us and everybody really hard. The short version is, if you want to get an Underrealm book for yourself or a loved one for the holidays, you should really order it now. We have a limited supply of books, and if we sell out of them, it's very unlikely that we're going to get any more. To order your books now, go to underrealm.net/books. I recommend the full hardcover collection. It's 10 great books in 4 great volumes for one great price. Or you can check out any of the other awesome titles we have available. Buying our books is literally the best way you can support this show and keep it going. And again, if you want to give the Underrealm books as a gift this year, you should order yours as soon as possible. Just go to underrealm.net/books. Okay, now it's time for today's episode. Today, you're getting Chapter 11 of Darkfire. When we left off, Lauren and her friends were fleeing deeper into the Great Rock Mountains after narrowly escaping a warband of satyrs. Enjoy! Darkfire, Chapter 11. The children climbed on the plow horse, and Lauren quickly gained her saddle atop Midnight, but Jordell waited a moment before mounting. He went to the rear of his horse first, and there he seized the back of Zane's neck. The wizard's head came up, and Jordell slapped him with a flat palm. "Jordell!" cried Lauren. He ignored her, pulling Zane from the horse's back and casting him to the ground. Zane fought for his feet, and Jordell helped him by snatching the front of his collar to drag him up. Then he slapped him again. "Stop it!" cried Lauren, climbing down from Midnight. Albern only watched with a dark look in his eyes. "I know you goaded the horse to rear, Zane." A dangerous undercurrent of fury in the mystic's voice chilled Lauren's heart. "We might have passed without incident but for you. You endangered us all because of your weakness." He seized Zane's throat in his hands, and the wizard's face began to turn red. Lauren ran forwards and pulled at Jordell's arms, but she might as well have tried to move the mountain they stood on. Zane only stared daggers at the mystic, and even through his pain she could see the hatred burning in his eyes. "I know you suffer now," said Jordell. "I know your hunger eats away at you from the inside, until you wish you could die from the pain of it. But you brought it upon yourself. You have no one else to blame, and certainly not these children. I will not let you use your agony as an excuse to endanger their lives." He pushed Zane back until they stood just fingers from the edge of the mountain path. Annis screamed in fright. "Risk their safety again, and I will fling you to the valley floor. You are a mighty wizard, but you cannot fly. Though I need you, still I would give your life for theirs and lose no sleep over it." He released Zane, who fell to the ground. Lauren seized his coat and dragged him away from the path's edge. She looked back with worry and saw Jem and Annis watching. Annis's eyes were filled with fear, but Jem's held a curious light. He watched not with fear or even anxiousness, but with a grim sort of approval. Jordell stalked back to his horse. From his bags he fetched a new length of rope and a pair of leather bags. They reminded Lauren of a leather hood used to shield a falcon's eyes, but larger. Jordell wrapped the hoods around Zane's clenched hands, and then he bound them tight with straps that hung from the wrists. He undid the rope that connected Zane's hands and feet, moved his hands behind his back, and retied them. The knots were now so tight that Zane could scarcely move his hands above his lower back. Finally, Jordell threw the wizard over the horse and bound him to the saddle once more. "That will be a far harsher ride," remarked Albern. "He has earned it," said Jordell. "Come, lead us on, and quickly." They rode at a gallop now, Zane bouncing terribly on Jordell's horse. At first, Lauren could hear him giving small yelps of pain, but they finally subsided as he slumped on the horse's flanks, senseless. Jordell did not command them to stop at midday for a meal, or for anything else. Only once did he allow them to walk the horses, and gave them all provisions to eat as they rode. He took no food himself, but only kept glancing back angrily at Zane. Everyone seemed to have caught his dour mood. No one spoke, not even Jem to complain. Sunset came, and soon the last sliver of sun vanished over the western mountains. Lauren thought that surely they would stop then, but Albert nudged his horse over to confer with Jordell. Then the bowyer turned back to them. "We will ride on through the night, but slower," he said. "I wish to give the satyrs no chance to track us. It might be safe here, but I shall feel more secure after a few more hours." "Through the night?" said Annis, exhaustion plain in the slump of her shoulders. "I am ready to fall from this saddle." "I do not recommend it," said Albern. "Keep the horses at a brisk walk. Pinch yourself if you must, but stay awake." Silver moon's light bathed them through the night. Though it was still a bit dim, Lauren found that she had grown quite accustomed to traveling by moon's light over the past many weeks, and could see almost as well as during the day. Midnight seemed at ease as well, for she followed briskly behind Jordell's charger. The plow horse, however, was unused to such stretches of travel, and began to stumble as it walked. Soon its meandering grew too much, and Lauren shouted up to Albern. "I fear for the children's horse. It looks tired enough to pitch them over the edge." He glanced back to see. "It is only a few hours until dawn," he said. "That horse is not well used to such journeys, but it will not fail us. Keep on, and Annis, give him a switch of the reins every now and then." "But who will switch me?" grumbled Annis. "I am just as tired, though I do not carry so heavy a burden." Jem's head was dug into the back of her shoulders, and Lauren guessed the boy was asleep. Dawn found them at last, exhausted but safe. The path had begun to descend again, and Lauren could see by the sun's first rays that it leveled off mayhap 15 paces above the valley floor, then ran at that height until she could no longer see it. When Albern found an alcove and ordered a halt, Lauren and the children leaped from their saddles as quickly as they could. Jem flung himself on the rocky soil and fell asleep at once. Annis curled up beside him for warmth and did the same, not even bothering to secure her steed. Though Lauren greatly desired to join them, she forced herself to hobble Midnight and the plow horse. Then she got her bedroll and fell asleep just as Albern began to light a cooking fire. She woke near midday. Annis was up and sitting by the fire, while Jem still snored loudly in the same place he had been. Jordell sat against the wall of the alcove, keen blue eyes fixed unerringly upon the flames. Lauren wondered if he had slept. Zane was trussed up not far away, his back to them all. "Welcome back to wakefulness," said Albern. "We shall rest here today and through the night as well, then continue on the morrow. It would be tempting to press on now that we have slept, but it is not wise to stumble exhausted through the great rocks. Our limbs and bones need more time to recover." "You do not need to tell me twice," said Annis. "Rarely have I ached so badly, and in so many places." Lauren smirked as she sat beside them near the fire. Though no rain fell, the day was gray and cold, and she relished the heat of the flames as they bathed her face. Beneath her drawn hood, she studied Annis from the corner of her eyes. The girl did not shy away from Lauren's nearness, nor did her eyes hold the anger they once had. Either the danger of the satyrs had made Annis forget her anger for a moment, or she had chosen to let the matter go. Lauren hoped it was the latter. Annis was a dear friend, and one of her few left in the world. Without the girl, and Jem, and even Jordell, and she was slowly starting to believe, Albern, who would Lauren have? And sitting there, Lauren noticed something else. Annis was no longer the plump young merchant's daughter she once had been. Though it had been scarcely a few months since they met, she seemed to have changed somehow. She was certainly a bit taller, but the change was not only in her height, nor in the fresh slimness of her waist, nor even her cheeks that were no longer as full as they once had been. Her eyes held a curious maturity, like a woman grown. She is not a child, thought Lauren. When first they met, Annis had held on to so many youthful ideas, despite the horror she had seen as a little girl. That youth seemed to be fading now. While Annis's eyes could still light up at a simple thing like a beautiful dress, she had become a different person during their time on the road. Jem, too, was changing. He still bore the marks of a hard life in the city, with his twiggy limbs and wide, hungry eyes. But those limbs were not nearly so thin as they had once been, and Lauren could see the beginnings of muscles starting to grow. He, like Annis, was taller and growing faster than she. Once he had hardly reached Lauren's chest, but now she would have to stretch to put her chin on top of his head. Lauren wondered with a start if she, too, looked different. She had never had her own mirror, and rarely did she ever look at her own reflection in the waters of a still pool. When she did, she saw nothing remarkable. Everyone commented on her green eyes, but beyond that, she thought herself rather plain. What did she look like now, she wondered. May up a bit finer in her noble's cloak, but surely more worn as well. She felt worn, or rather ground down, honed, thinner and sharper, as though the edges of her had been filed into blades, with any excess rubbed off. With a start and a final snort, Jem finally awoke. He looked around as though uncertain of where he was, and then he approached the fire to sit on Lauren's other side. Together they ate a silent lunch, while Jordell stared into the fire and Albern kept watch. Once Jem had devoured his last morsel, Jordell stood. He went to his horse and dug through the saddlebags. When his hands came out, they held a short, narrow blade, hardly larger than a dirk. "Jem of the family Noctis," said Jordell. "Yesterday you asked me for a blade, and I scorned you for being unable to use one. I was wrong to do so, and I ask your forgiveness. I was worried at the threat to our lives." Jem bowed his head graciously, like a king accepting a boon from a servant, but his eyes burned with an eager light as he stood and looked up at Jordell. "I took no offense." "Then let me make you a gift," said Jordell. "Take this weapon and call it your own. And as for learning how to use it, if you wish, I will teach you." Jem's eyes shone, and Lauren thought he might weep. He reached for the sword with shaking hands. The blade rattled in its scabbard. "I thank you," he said, his voice full of emotion. "Do you fancy a lesson now?" said Jordell. "I think we could all use a distraction after yesterday." "Of course," said Jem. He struggled to put the sword belt on, but could not work the buckle. He had worn only a simple belt of rope tied at the waist since Lauren had first met him. Jordell knelt as if he were the boy's squire and helped him secure the sword in place. When Jordell stood, he gave Annis a curious look. "You too are welcome to learn." Annis looked at both of them, both bashful and eager. "I would not presume to trouble you. I have had no experience with weapons, for it was not thought proper by my mother. She taught me to battle with words." "I have trained many much older than you," said Jordell, "and many who had never so much as touched a sword in their life. Say the word, and my instruction is yours." Annis lowered her eyes. "Not just now, I think. Let me watch a while first, and then we shall see if I can muster the courage." "Come and join us, Lauren," said Jem. "Surely you would make a fine fighter." Lauren shook her head firmly. "A sword is a weapon for killing people," she said. "I will not spend my time learning to do so, even if the knowledge is never used." Jem rolled his eyes and shrugged. "You are a fair and beautiful flower, Lauren, and one day this world will crush you under its boot for it. But have it your way." Jordell had Jem draw and began to teach him sword stances. Lauren wandered away from them to the mouth of the alcove where Albern stood looking out. He stood in silence and did not look at her when she approached. But when she stayed silent for a while, he glanced at her. "You have never killed a man before?" "Nor a woman, nor anyone," said Lauren. "Nor will I." "A curious rule. Not one I find often in those I meet traveling the 9 lands." "Yet it is mine. I will not break it." "You loosed arrows at the satyrs easily enough when they threatened us." Lauren cocked her head. Was he having a joke with her? "Those were beasts." Albern fixed her with a hard glare. "They speak in their own tongue and in the tongue of humans. Have you learned their language? For Tiglac took the time to learn yours, and they craft tools and weapons of war, just as we do." But they are not human," said Lauren, confused. "They are goat men." Albern shook his head. "Many who serve evil have left scores of dead in their wake, and roused great armies to slaughter countless more, all by saying their foes were less than human. It is a dangerous attitude to hold, no matter your foe." "You are joking," said Lauren. "Do you not kill animals for your meals? I see little difference." "The day cattle can turn to me and plead for mercy, I will stay my blade from their throats," said Albern, "and I would not eat a satyr. But never mind. You may think on this further or not, as you wish. But you did not come here to argue your conscience with me, I suppose." "I did not," said Lauren, though in truth Albern's words troubled her greatly. She had not thought to look at the satyrs in such a way, and now that she did, her heart was troubled. But she shook it off. "I saw you fighting yesterday with your bow. I have never seen someone shoot like that." Albern gave a little smile and looked down at his boots. "You noticed that, did you? Aye, those in Selvin often say I have some skill with a bow, though in my homeland I am accounted no great marksman." "You do not come from Selvin, then? Whence do you hail?" "I am a man of Colentin, as your mystic companion could probably tell you. There we learned the bow from a very young age, for our land is hard and dangerous, and we do not use them to slay our enemies from across the battlefield, firing great shafts from on high with longbows. In Colentin you must learn to protect yourself with a bow from only a few paces away, and in the blink of an eye." "Would you teach me?" Lauren had not meant to state it so plainly, but she could not stop herself from blurting the words out. "I want to shoot like that." Albern frowned. "A poor skill, it seems, for one determined not to kill." "More than humans may pose a danger, and I do not mean the satyrs. There are bears in the world, and lions, and tales tell of other animals far more dangerous. And besides, often I must hunt to eat. Being able to shoot so quickly would be a powerful skill when searching for food, especially if the prey spots me and bolts." "That is why you wish to shoot, then?" said Albern, smirking. "To fetch yourself dinner?" Lauren's cheeks burned. "If you do not wish to teach me, you may simply say so." He resumed his watch beyond the mouth of the alcove, surveying the mountains. "I am hired as a guide, not an instructor. I have concerns aplenty without spending time each day showing you my warcraft." There came a soft plink, plink upon the ground, and Lauren's eyes were drawn to the sound. Albern, too, looked down to see 3 gold weights at his feet. They raised their gazes to find Jordell standing nearby, 2 fingers still buried in his purse. I can pay more if you think it fair, said Jordell shortly. Not often will she have the chance to learn from one of the famed archers of Calenton. Lauren flushed as she nodded her thanks to him. She had not thought he was listening, but she had to remind herself that Jordell often saw and heard far more than he let on. Alburn stooped to gather the coins, stuffing them into a pocket in his cloak. It is a fair enough payment, though I cannot watch and teach at the same time. I will take the watch, for I would much like to see Lauren learn this skill from you. And besides, I have exhausted my own student for the moment. Lauren looked past him. Jem lay on his back in the center of the alcove, sword lying loose on the ground beside him, his chest rising and falling heavily with each ragged breath. A small welt had risen on his arm, no doubt from a sharp lesson by Jordell. She snickered. Alburn gave Lauren a long look and nodded. Very well, daughter of the family Nelda. Let us teach you the true nature of a tool you have long misused. This has been a production of Legacy Books, written and narrated by Garrett Robinson. The music in this podcast was created by Will Musser. Check out his incredible work at willmusser.com. That's WILLMUSSER.com. Today's letter is D. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.